you can fly a Cessna 172, a Cessna 152, a Cherokee. They all would fall under all of that. With
Right.
jets, you have to go to this intensive training that's very expensive for that exact jet that you're on.
Yeah, the
So
FAA just
you
deemed that these machines are too complex just to say that you can fly the Boeing 737, you can go fly the Airbus 320. You have to have specific training just for that machine. That's how complex they are.
Hi, welcome to the Pro Pilot Playbook. I'm Mike Martin,
And I'm Sean Ritchie.
and this is the YouTube channel that you guys all subscribe to learn to be pilots faster and cheaper. And we're here to bring you information, hopefully weekly, that will help you launch your career.
Yeah, we're not just on YouTube though, Mike. Don't forget, iTunes and
That's right.
Amazon, whatever. We're like 15 different platforms. And the
Yep.
show's going great because all you guys are tuning in watching us. And
Yeah,
we
yeah.
greatly appreciate it.
Our viewership has gone up tremendously in the last few months, so we do appreciate all the viewers.
Yeah, and Mike, right away, I'm sure people are noticing your backdrop there.
My new office.
Yeah, it's changed. Something's different.
Yeah. So we're trying to do these weekly now. So sometimes Sean and I aren't always together in Cincinnati. So yeah, I'm on a trip right now. I'm in Chicago, the great city of Chicago, and I'm on the pier actually here on Navy Pier, right on the water here. There's a new hotel. It's fantastic, a Hilton that is actually at the end of the pier, and that's where I'm at. So the view is a bit distracting. These speedboats are going by with like 400 tourists on it, as I sit. But actually, the weather here, it's very nice temperature wise, but there's a major visibility problem, and the air quality is terrible. But so I guess I'm sure you read about it, Sean. But there's been some fires in Canada, forest fires. That smoke has blown south. It's even in Cincinnati too, but it's even worse here. So we were, let's see, the visibility was down to 1.25 miles this morning, and it improved a little up to maybe 2 miles, but we had to shoot an instrument approach into here.
Are you at Midway, or where'd you guys come into?
We actually use Gary.
Okay.
It's works out fantastic. Yeah, if you're trying to get downtown.
I'm familiar with Gary.
Yeah,
Just go in there
yeah.
all the time. That's
Yeah,
Michael Jackson's boyhood home is
That's
there
right.
in Gary, Indiana.
You got a moonwalk in front of his house. That's what
I
you do.
have
Put it
a
on
picture
Instagram.
of me doing the moonwalk in front of Michael Jackson's boyhood home. Back when we were flying charter, and I'm in my 20s, it was hilarious back then,
Oh man, yeah. So no, shout out to the folks at Gary Jet Center. Beautiful FBO there. The runway is fantastic. It's like a almost 9,000-foot runway, and just compared to that gridlock of Chicago Midway, I mean, there's really just no comparison, really.
Sure. And
But,
Midway's super expensive.
Yes. There's always that. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the episode we're making today, this is we do episodes on specific questions that people put in that are great, and please keep those coming in. It helps us find things. But what we're getting now, same as the last episode that we made, it's just a ton of the same type of questions.
Sure.
So we're trying to combine that. But there is a very basic question, and you already saw by the title, that a ton of people ask. And it's not just you guys. It's whenever you meet somebody that's a pilot, they say, what do they say, Sean?
So I can just go over there and get my pilot's license at the little local airport, and I can come to work for you, fly jets, or there's a story about their uncle. Oh, my uncle's a pilot. Oh yeah, who's he fly for? Oh well, he rents Cessnas, and he took us for a ride one time.
Yes.
So there's different
like, my neighbor has a jet license.
Sure.
He's got a jet license. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a common misconception. It's not just one license. There's several layers to this cake here. So that's what this episode's about. We're gonna break down the each layer of that cake to keep that analogy going, and we're gonna bring them to you, present them in the order that the typical order one would acquire them.
Yeah, that's great. So let's start at the beginning. You basically become a student pilot, and in order to do that, you just obtain a medical from an aviation doctor, and then you're good to start your flying. So now you kind of got to decide what your first rating is going to be. So historically, it's always been the private pilot's license, and that allows you to fly Cessnas in good weather and all that. And that's by far, I would say, the most common one. There are two other ones that are a little newer. And Sean, what are those? You could tell them.
Sure. So besides the private pilot certificate, we'll use everybody calls it a license, even in our industry. You notice Mike just said license, but we'll as it's described in the federal aviation regulations. So there's certificates and there's ratings. So that first one, like Mike just mentioned, is the private pilot certificate. But the FAA a few years back, well, actually, one of them's been around for a while. They created two layers below the private, simpler things to obtain, and they have more restrictions on them and what you're allowed to do with these certificates. But they're the recreational pilot certificate and the sport pilot certificate. And anybody that's listening to this, we're assuming that you're wanting to be a professional pilot in some manner, airlines, corporate, charter,
Right.
that kind of stuff. So that there would be no use in chasing after a recreational or a sport pilot certificate. In my
Right.
opinion, in our opinion, it would be a waste of your time and money. Unless you make it like
Yeah.
halfway through and decide you don't want to be a professional and you just want to draw a line in the sand and just get the recreational. But yeah, the recreational is the next one down. And this one, Mike, you were just looking at it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll let you.
Yeah, the recreational. Yeah. The recreational license was out when I was training, and it's not a bad thing to get. It's a couple more steps that if you're trying to get to the ultimate goal of get your ratings in quick as cheap as possible, that you really don't need to do. But it's not all bad. So basically, it's a private pilot's license minus all the training that you do for cross country. Is an easy way to do that. So you still learn down on land. You learn everything about the airplane, and you learn how to fly it. You solo it, all of that stuff. But you don't do the portion of your training where you have to fly to these airports that are greater than 50 miles away and learn how to, navigate from around your base airport. But so what it enables you to do, and you don't do your night training. So what that
Right.
enables you to do is to fly around your home airport in good weather and take people flying, up to one person or something, your friends. And honestly, a lot of people that learn to fly, that's all they really do. They just rent a plane for an hour and they go up and fly around. So for some
Sure.
people, it works great. The other thing that was neat about it is it's just a progression in your path. So it kind of breaks up the pilot's license and gives you some momentum because you got something, and you don't really waste your training. So you can get endorsements for each individual thing. So you could do your night training after your recreational license, and your instructor could give you a night endorsement. Then you can fly at
Right.
night. So you can get different ratings along the way. But
The
all
reason
in all,
why,
it's just right.
right. The
Go ahead.
reason why I was saying for somebody that's wanting to be a professional, you wouldn't really, I mean, I guess you could, but in my mind, I just viewed it as you'd be wasting time and money preparing for a check
Totally.
ride and you could just keep
You're
on
right.
trucking through
Yeah.
and get your private. But it does
To-
have a purpose. If you were just wanting to get your pilot's license to take your kids for an airplane ride, then yeah, go for it.
yeah. It's fun to have.
Save you a
And,
lot of
and
money and time. The other
yep.
one is the sport pilot's license, and this
Yes.
thing is we should mention with the recreational license, you can rent normal airplanes or own an airplane. A normal, when I say normal, I mean like a Cessna 172 or one of the
Piper
Piper
Cherokee.
type things,
Yep.
and you could even but the sport pilot's license, the next one, this one is the newer one, the newest of them. And this thing only requires 20 hours of training. You don't have to have a medical. You just have to have a valid driver's license. So whatever the
Yeah.
DMV did when they checked your eyes, and when that's pretty much all they do,
Yeah.
they claim that you're good enough to do this sport pilot. But there's a bunch of restrictions. The aircraft, they created a whole new this light sport category, and Cessna sells some of these things, and there's a whole bunch of other makes of these out there. There's these, they look like tiny little airplanes almost, made out of fiberglass, most of them. But there's a bunch of restrictions on what that airplane can't weigh so much and that kind of stuff. And the sport pilot's license, you can only have up to one passenger. You can't use this license to, if you're traveling for work, you can't use it to further your business. There's a bunch of restrictions on it, but I almost, after reading it, Mike,
Right.
'cause ultralights have been around forever, but light sport aircraft are a little bit bigger than an ultralight, but
Right. Yeah.
but you don't need anything to fly an ultralight. You can just go buy one of these things and go out there and kill yourself if you wanted.
Yeah. Be careful. Yeah.
Yeah, but I almost feel like the FAA created the sport pilot's license thing just to, because the airspace is getting so, everything's getting busy out there and congested. I almost feel like they created this as an easy jumping off point for somebody that may fly an ultralight or something
Yeah.
to get them some training, So we just didn't
Right.
have a bunch of, people willy-nilly flying around in aircraft and getting themselves in trouble. But,
Right. Yep.
okay.
Yeah.
So
So
we got our private pilot certificate. The next progression,
it's the
typically
instrument rating.
which is not a certificate. This is just a add-on to a certificate. It's a little confusing until you start getting in there and looking at it all, but it's not a separate certificate. It's just an additional thing that allows you to fly without being able to see out the windows. Basically, everything you've been doing up to that point with your private pilot certificate is looking out the window and using the ground as reference to things. So
Right.
adding on that instrument rating is the next step and allows you to land like Mike just did in Chicago, not being able to see
Right.
out the windows. One thing we skipped over though, the private pilot certificate takes 40 hours is the minimum requirement. I would say the average, I'm just guessing here. I'm guessing the average is probably 60-ish, maybe
60. That's what I remember,
65.
from when we were doing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
Yeah. Yeah.
the
And the instrument rating, that's what I would say is that's a very important rating because that's what you use all throughout your career. Nobody flies jets, visually around the country, or VFR, what we call them. It's all based on instrument rating, and the things you learn there, those things you study, will be applied throughout your career.
Yeah, I would say it's probably the hardest out of all the training. People seem to struggle the most with the instrument rating stuff. It's just a whole different basket of rules, and I don't know. For some reason, especially back when you and I did it, Mike, we didn't have moving maps and all this stuff. We had
Back in the good old days. Man.
Yeah, round gauges. And it is a little different back then, but
It was, man. Yeah, it's definitely easier now with the electronics.
right.
For sure.
Absolutely. And then the instrument rating. So there is each one of these, it's not just a general, like I said, 40 hours on the private minimum. There's a whole bunch of, little sub requirements, like so many hours across country, so many hours of solo. You need to have one solo cross country that meets certain requirements with so many airports
Right.
you land at. With the instrument rating, it's the same thing. The biggest thing to check off the list of requirements on the instrument rating is there's a 40-hour requirement of either simulated or actual instrument time. And that's where you would be wearing the view limiting device, which is either a hood.
Right.
We were just talking about this in one of the last prior episodes here. Or they got these foggles, which are basically safety glasses, and the tops of them are all kind of scratched off, so you can only see down at the instruments. But
Yep.
Yeah. Then what do we got?
Yeah. So then after that, you have to get your commercial pilot's license, and what that rating does is allow you to fly for money. It's a big step to move you towards a professional pilot. So yeah, that rating can be done. It's not done in a jet. It's done in the same small plane, Cessna or Cirrus or whatever they're Piper that they're training on now. And there's some maneuvers and things that you do, some more advanced flight maneuvers to show that you can really control the plane. You do a cross country that's 250 nautical miles. So that's a long ways in a Cessna or a really light airplane. And you have to show that you have, the navigational skills required to do that, and the
Mhm.
flight planning and management. And, it helps you deal with more. Typically, you're dealing with different types of weather when you're flying that far away. So yeah, that rating is a big one once you get that, and I think that's 250 hours total
Yep.
time. You
Yep.
have to have that.
Right. And that's a
Yeah,
certificate. That's a whole certificate on its own. So you're going from a private pilot certificate to a commercial pilot certificate. And then
and
another
then let's not forget. Hold on, what were you going to say about the technical airplane, advanced type
oh
airplanes
yeah,
that
the
qualify for that?
TAA. Yeah, that's one of the little sub requirements of the commercial. Used to be like when you and I did it, they wanted you in a complex aircraft, which meant retractable landing gear, constant speed prop. So
Right,
that was you had to have so many hours of that. So that was a big thing. Finding a flight school with something like that you could rent to get that time.
right,
But now they switched it over to technically advanced airplane, which is more of what you'd be. They realized, the FAA realized that it's not really good for anything to have these guys doing complex airplane because, that airplane's more expensive to maintain. You're just going to have flight schools with the crappiest thing out there possible. If it had
right,
retractable landing gear and a constant speed prop, that's not really helping anybody because as soon as they get all this, they're going to be eventually sitting in a jet staring at computer screens, or at the airline staring at computer screens, which don't even have round gauges. We have speed
right.
tapes and altitude tapes. So they created this TAA, technically advanced airplane, which is like your Garmin G1000 panel, or the typical what you see in a cockpit nowadays, the computer screens. And yeah,
Great.
they have Cessnas out there. Cessna sells the G1000, the airplane with the Cessna 172 with the G1000 in it, which is it's a pretty neat thing. That Garmin unit is pretty amazing, actually,
Right,
compared
right,
to what we
right.
had.
It's sweet, man. It is sweet. So then after that, you got to get your ATP license,
Well, wait,
and
wait, we
that's
forgot one. We forgot one. The typical what somebody would do right after that commercial, and you can do this anytime because it's a rating. Just like you don't necessarily, you could chase after your commercial right after your private and not even mess
right.
with the instrument. You could wait and do your instrument afterwards. Typically, nobody does that. But there's the multi-engine rating.
Oh yes,
Yeah, this allows you to fly an airplane with more than one engine. And typically, what folks do is add that on to their commercial, and it's it's basically it's probably the simplest out of all of them. To be honest, and it's the quickest. I mean,
yeah.
it really is.
6 hours or something.
Yeah, yeah, you could be ready to take your check ride in less than 10 hours. And it used to be, Mike, when you and I came up, an airline wouldn't even look at you unless you had 100 or 200 hours of multi-engine time. That was the big thing
Right,
everybody was trying
big
to
thing.
figure out how to get. Um,
Right,
Nowadays, all you need is a multi-engine rating. You need the 10 or 12 hours you got when you got your rating added to your certificate, and you're good for the airlines
right.
after the
Yeah,
whole 1,500-hour rule change with the ATP and everything. But yeah, sorry, I had to stick that in there. I can't
yeah.
can't let them forget
That's
about
good.
multi-engine.
Yeah, yeah. So the ATP then is next, which stands for Airline Transport Pilot, and that's what you need really to become an airline pilot. And that's a extensive rating. There's a bunch of different hour requirements for that. That require a lot more than the 250 hours that you'll have when you get your commercial. So basically, not to confuse people, but that's why people get their flight instruction rating um, um, between commercial and ATP, because it allows you to flight instruct people and then log time while you're getting paid in order to move you closer to that ATP. And one of our biggest videos, actually in the history of Pro Pilot Playbook, is how to skip your CFI.
Yeah.
And you can reference that video. There's other things you can do to gain that flight time to get you ready, than instruct. But the most common way is to get a flight instructor rating.
Right. So the highest certificate there is the ATP. But while you were talking, I just thought of an interesting thing here. This could be a whole another podcast.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so what can I do with my commercial certificate? Does that mean I'm ready to go to the airlines, with 250 hours?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No.
So this is, yeah, just because the wording, the names of the actual certificates are confusing. It sounds like a commercial pilot. Oh, I'm ready to go fly for Delta.
A commercial jet. Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah. It's crazy.
that certificate's only required 250 hours to get. The certificate, the ATP that you need to get on with the airlines requires 1,500 hours. So in order to get on with an actual airline or a company that's, the FAA uses the word holding out to the public, which means offering travel or offering to fly your boxes, your freight from here to there. That's a different basket of rules. And that's the ATP, which requires 1,500 hours, 1,500 hours. But with the commercial, there's still plenty of stuff you can do with it.
Right. Yeah. There's quite a few things.
Yeah, you could do the aerial mapping or flight instructor. There's a couple big ones, but
Sightseeing. I think you can do sightseeing flights and stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say we're rambling on here. We can't forget about the what we titled this podcast. What we actually named it.
Yes.
Go ahead though.
The jet rating.
Yeah.
The jet rating. One thing I wanted to throw in too, with each one of these licenses that you get, there's basically a written test that you take, which is a multiple choice FAA written test that you can study for. And there's tools that help you study for those and practice tests and things like that. And then there's an oral test where the examiner, you sit down with an FAA examiner and they can ask you things about the plane and things about your rating. And then there's a flight test where you actually get in the plane with the examiner and then demonstrate whatever's required for that rating. And then you get their certificate. Yeah.
Sure.
So after all of those check rides, and then you get all the way up to your ATP, then you want to fly a jet.
Right.
So that gets to the big ratings, and they're called type ratings. And a type rating is required if you're captain on a airplane that's over 12,500 pounds or is powered by a jet engine or a turbojet, they call it, not turboprop. So you can fly like a King Air, doesn't require a type rating because it's a jet engine that drives a propeller. These are pure jets that you see. They all require that. And the reason that came to light is, there's a lot of light jets now coming out, like the Cirrus jet and things like that, that are jet powered airplane that are very fast, but they're under 12,500 pounds. So pretty much any jet is required a type rating. So what a type rating is kind of the name of the type. It's a specific training, highly tailored to that exact airplane. Mm-hmm. So even though Sean and I are rated in, these different business jets, if somebody just handed us a jet that we haven't flown, like I'm flying a Challenger now, if somebody just stuck me in a Falcon and I've never been in one ever my whole life, I wouldn't know how to fly it. I mean, I could maybe steal it if I.
I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could fly it, but you couldn't do it legally.
Legally, right. So all the switches are different.
Sure.
Some of them have different computer systems that operate differently. They work at different weights, thrust levers, limitations. There's different emergency equipment on the airplane. You have to learn all about the fuel burn, how to load it, the weight and balance. I mean, this is a lot that goes into it. So it's not like a private pilot's license. That allows you to fly. You can fly a Cessna 172, a Cessna 152, a Cherokee, all a Piper Cub. They all fall under that. With the tailwheel endorsement, they all would fall under all of that. With jets, you have to go to this intensive training that's very expensive for that exact jet that you're on.
Yeah, the FAA deemed that these machines are too complex just to say that you can fly the Boeing 737, you can go fly the Airbus 320. You have to have specific training just for that machine. That's how complex they are, and they operate differently. The guts of them, the machinery and the mechanics and the technology in them is so different You got to
Yes.
have a license just for that jet, is the way I usually explain it to people. When it comes to jets, you got to have a license just for that jet, but it's a type rating. Again, this is a rating, so it's an add on, just like the multi engine rating, just like the instrument rating. It can be added on to any of the certificates, and the certificates are private, commercial, ATP, airline transport pilot certificate. So technically, you could have just a private pilot's license or certificate with an instrument rating. And if you're a wealthy individual and you go buy one of
Right.
those Cirrus jets, you can get your Cirrus jet type rating added to your private instrument. I actually
Yeah, I
know a
think there was a
guy.
golfer. Right? Yeah,
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 yeah.
that
I've
did that.
I've seen this a couple times in my career. These guys that they just have private instruments, but they own a little jet, like one of those little what are the Mustang, that citation,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
little jet.
Eclipse jet. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the
There's all
Eclipse
kinds.
jet. There's another good example. Um, but yeah, so that's basically the meat and potatoes of not only the progression. It's kind of a 40,000 foot overflight of the progression of getting all your certificates and ratings, but also kind of a
Yeah,
description of them here.
and it's kind of interesting. So, what a type rating entails, these things are very expensive. You go to a school that has that supports that aircraft, and usually there's only one or two, maybe in some cases three schools in the whole world that handle that plane. And you can do it in the actual airplane, but nobody does that because of insurance reasons, and also it's
Super
expensive.
expensive. But you
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
do,
So,
those simulators though. I mean, you can do things in simulators you can't do in a real airplane. Um,
right,
well, you could
like
do
catch
them
it on fire.
once. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So these places, these centers have these level D full motion simulators that are incredible. The training is very expensive. It can range from 20,000 all the way to over 100,000 per pilot, depending on the type of airplane. Obviously, the more advanced airplanes, you get into these brand new Gulf Streams and things like that. Those can be six-figure type ratings that these companies pay generally. Generally, the pilot doesn't pay, but once you get selected by the company, they know you're good. They'll train you in these very expensive planes, and it's very serious. I mean, you'll go away for a month typically, and this is all you'll do every day. And there's usually a very intensive ground school, about 8 hours a day for a week or two, where they go through every little thing with the airplane, how to operate all the systems, how to handle system failures. Then they bring you into a mock-up cockpit, or in some cases, they have these cockpit trainers that actually function like the real airplane, have
Right.
you work on all your checklists and things like that to get you prepared. And then you go into the advanced simulator training where you're actually in the simulator for lots of hours. And you're, like Sean said, they're catching the simulator on fire. They're killing engines on you. You're losing pressurization. You're
Right.
mistakenly flying into terrain. I mean, you name it. And
Somehow
then
all your hydraulic fluid's gone. But no,
yeah, it's a real bad.
it sounds intense the way you just described it. But
Yes,
I, for somebody, in this career field, whatever, I mean, we like it though. I mean, learning a new
right.
airplane, it's it's very
It's
enjoyable
exciting.
to me. Yeah, I like sitting there and learning. When I flip this switch on, well, it energizes this, opens this valve, which allows this to flow through and whatever. Of course, if you don't, well, I don't know. I love all that stuff. So and
Yeah,
I think most guys that fly airplanes do. Um,
right. And usually, when you're getting a type rating, you're advancing in your career. So
sure.
the normal progression typically is you're flying bigger and better planes as you advance in your career. So usually you're flying something newer and more exciting when you're
Right.
there in school. So that makes you happy to do it. It really
Sure.
does.
Yeah. It may
Yeah.
even be a whole new job in general. You just got hired.
Right.
Now you're off in training. Yeah. Yeah. So it's generally, a pleasant experience.
Yep.
Unless you
Yep.
get that
But
middle of the night sim schedule, unless you got like the 3 a.m. slot, that one isn't much fun.
yeah, so with the coronavirus and the pilot shortage, a lot of these companies are trading these jets. So people are buying bigger jets, and then people that are just getting into jets are acquiring their first jet. and there's a demand for pilots. So every time a pilot quits and you hire a new pilot, that pilot needs to be trained. So as you can imagine, in the last few years, the demand for these training slots is unbelievable. Because you may have a wealthy person may buy a jet, and then he may hire pilots, but he still can't fly the plane. He's got a paperweight, we call it, because his pilots haven't been trained.
Right.
So a lot of times there's waiting lists for these training slots. And to Sean's point, you get it, man, and then they're running those because there's only one simulator a lot of times for that plane. They're running that thing 24 hours a day. So you may get unlucky if you book late, and you may have that slot that is in the middle of the night, and you're up all night, trying to train, But it's always a good time, and these are great questions. I'm glad we got to explain it for everybody.
Right. Yes. And speaking of that, if you have a question you'd like us to get to here on the show, you can email us at podcast@propilotplaybook.com, and we'll get it up here.
Yeah, and if you like this video, really encourage everyone to subscribe. We love our subscribers, and we do have some great things coming up. We're in the works with a couple things in the next week. We're going to start to bring guests on the show and really just take this podcast to the next level. So make sure you subscribe so you get that push message whenever we put out a new one. Take a look at our course. It's fantastic. It really just teaches you everything you know to break into the industry. It's not very expensive, and it's a very extensive course. So keep the questions coming. Keep the likes and subscribes coming. We love it, and we'll keep committing to give you good material.
Yeah, hit all the buttons. That's the easiest way. Easiest way to say it.
Yep.
All right, thanks, folks. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.